The wind howled across the Arctic plateau, a sound sharp enough to flay skin, yet beneath it came something stranger, deeper, like a growl that traveled through the permafrost itself. Most men would never hear it, most men would never come this far north, but Dr. Ellison and her crew weren't most men. They weren't hunters, or soldiers, or shamans. They were scientists, driven by a satellite anomaly. A black triangle that the snow refused to cover. For weeks, the rumor spread through encrypted channels, a pyramid in the ice. Some whispered alien, others muttered Nazi occult relics from the war. But no one, not even the boldest of cryptid fanatics, expected what truly lay frozen in the Arctic silence, when they crested the final ridge and saw it half buried in snow. Every laugh in the group froze in their throats. It wasn't natural, it wasn't shaped by wind, glacier, or volcano. A perfect pyramid, obsidian black, its surface slick as glass and claw-marked. One of the men, Anders, brushed his gloved hand along the surface, tracing scars so deep they looked gouged by metal. But this wasn't metal, it wasn't ice. The markings looked animal. Ellison set her camera on a tripod, lenses fogging in the brutal cold. Click, click, click. Each shot captured something wrong. A pyramid that looked as though it absorbed light, drinking it down instead of reflecting. The ice hissed against it, like it was burning cold rather than freezing. The temperature dropped, their breath rose, but not into the sky. The fog rolled sideways, sucked toward a crack at the pyramid's base. That was when Anders stepped back. "Do you hear that?" The others paused, snow shifted. The sound wasn't wind. It wasn't earth, it was the low, rhythmic thud-thud of something massive moving inside the pyramid. They laughed nervously, because what else could they do? Just echo the sound. With their own nervous chatter, the Arctic had always been full of tricks. Ice expands, glaciers groan, nature plays games with your ears. But this was no game, this was a warning. Ellison raised her recorder, muttering into the microphone for later notes. "The site is active. Surface markings suggest violent interactions. Will log first entry by 0900 hours." Her voice cracked on the word violent, because even she could see what Anders wouldn't say aloud. The claw marks weren't just scratches. They were escape attempts. The wind shifted again, slicing their coats open like knives. In that unholy shriek of frozen air, Ellison swore she heard a howl, long, hungry, resonating through the pyramid's obsidian walls. Her hand trembled as she pulled the zipper higher, muttering through chattering teeth, "God help us if it isn't empty." Somewhere far beneath the frozen stone, something answered her words. The sound wasn't distant, it was inside the pyramid, it was awake. "If you felt the chill of that first howl, stay with you before the night takes you." The crack at the pyramid's base widened, as if it were breathing. Heat spilled from within, impossibly warmer than the killing cold outside. The crew stared, frost steaming from their goggles, until Ellison gave the inevitable order. "We go in." It wasn't courage that made them step forward, it was compulsion, the kind of pull explorers describe when they speak of sirens or cursed gold. The pyramid wanted them inside. The ice seemed eager to close behind them. Flashlights flickered against polished stone. The walls weren't carved, but poured, seamless slabs of black crystal. Symbols were etched everywhere, spirals, clawed beasts, and humans bent on their knees before them. The markings bled upward, writhing in patterns that made the skin crawl. Anders brushed one with his glove. The stone was warm to the touch. Too warm, he pulled back with a hiss. Ellison's recorder clicked on again. Interior temperature, above freezing air, is breathable. Symbols depict worship or captivity. She let the last word drag, as though it resisted being spoken. Then came the sound, faint at first, like distant water. But water didn't echo with rhythm. The crew froze. The sound was breathing, deep, guttural, and coming from all directions. Their headlamps swung across walls that seemed to drink light, forcing shadows to stretch long and twitch unnaturally. Further in, they found a chamber lit not by their equipment, but by the faint shimmer of blue luminescence seeping from cracks in the stone. The glow reminded them of the aurora itself, twisting light frozen into walls. Etched into the chamber floor was a mural, massive and horrifying. men tearing their own skins apart, faces stretching into lupin snarls. Surrounding them were smaller figures, shamans with staffs of bone, binding chains glowing with silver runes. This wasn't worship, Ellison whispered. It was containment. A shriek of static tore through their radios. Every flashlight went dark at once. Only the blue glow remained. The air itself felt thick, vibrating with a pulse that didn't belong to machines or geology. Then, the breath fog returned, but it didn't rise toward the ceiling. It funneled toward the mural, streaming into the mouths of the carved wolves. Their carved jaws seemed to move. Their stone eyes glowed faintly. Anders snapped, muttering, "We're not alone here. We need to." His words cut short as the chamber shook, snow dust raining from the cracks above. Somewhere far below, a long, hungry howl rose up the pyramid shaft, rattling bones. They weren't listening to an echo. They were listening to something alive. Some of you know this legend already. Comment if you've heard whispers of this curse before. The deeper they went, the warmer it grew. Not comfort warm, breath warm. As though the walls themselves exhaled, Ellison's pen scratched useless notes in her journal. Words felt empty against what they were seeing. Murals of men split open, their jaws elongating, their hands curling into claws, chained by silver bands. Anders muttered, voice trembling, "This isn't history, it's warning." He was right. At the chamber's center stood an altar of obsidian, cracked down the middle. On it rested something like a jawbone, enormous, not human, gleaming faintly, as if frost could not touch it. The group leaned closer, breath pluming, over the relic. Then, it happened. Anders reached for his canteen, fingers fumbling. The metal edge sliced his glove. A small bead of blood splattered onto the altar. It sizzled, hissed. The stone drank it like dry soil swallowing rain. The mural wolves flared with light chains. Carved in the stone, blazed silver, then snapped apart in showers of sparks. The pyramid groaned. A low rumble shook snow loose from the ceiling. And from below, something answered. The breath in the chamber shifted direction. No longer being pulled into the murals, but exhaled back into the air. A stench followed copper and rot. Furlong buried, and now awake, Anders staggered backward. Hand pressed to the cut, his veins blackened beneath the skin. Crawling up his arm like ink, his body convulsed, bones popped. His scream choked off as his jaw split wide, teeth lengthening with sickening cracks. The sound was wet, awful flesh stretching, ligaments tearing, skin bruising from within. Ellison and the others screamed. They reached for Anders, but his eyes had already turned aura blue, glowing like the frozen sky. His screams dropped into a guttural growl that shook their stomachs. His spine snapped forward, back splitting his coat as black fur erupted. Spraying blood and fabric, Anders was gone. In his place was the first of them, the Arctic wolf, taller than a man, shoulders corded with muscle, its fur black as oil, dripping heat and steam into the freezing air. Its jaws snapped open, dripping saliva that froze before it hit the ground. It didn't lunge right away. It paced, slow, deliberate, savoring the terror. Behind the altar, cracks widened. Thud, 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 heavy paws scraping against stone, chains rattling. More were coming. The transformed Anders turned his gaze on the others. Ellison raised her flare gun, hand trembling. She fired. The flare hissed against its chest, not burning, not even slowing it down. The wolf snarled, eyes glowing brighter, and the flare fizzled to ash. The others bolted toward the chamber entrance. But Anders, the thing that had been Anders, moved faster. It struck with claws like obsidian knives, carving through a pack of gear like paper. The sound of rending canvas mixed with screams. Ellison stumbled, nearly dropping her recorder. Whispering through clenched teeth, the pyramid wasn't built to honor them. It was built to hold them. The obsidian altar pulsed again, cracks widening, light flooding the chamber. More claws raked from within. The werewolves were waking. If the snap of bone made you wince, hit like, and let the algorithm know you survived. The chamber erupted into chaos. The altar cracked fully in two, splitting with the sound of stone screaming. From the gap spilled vapor like steam from a boiling kettle, but it reeked of blood and musk. A predator's breath held back for centuries. Anders, or what had been, Anders howled, a sound that carried through every corridor of the pyramid. It was answered. Dozens of voices rose from below, blending into a chorus that shook the walls. It wasn't mere sound, it was vibration, a pulse so violent the snow outside avalanched from the pyramid's surface. Ellison's crew bolted, their boots hammering stone, as if speed alone could outrun the curse. Headlamps jittered in their panic, beams cutting across walls where carvings seemed to move. Wolves unchaining themselves in shadow. Behind them, claws. Scraped footfalls thundered. Ellison shouted, "Run, don't look back." But curiosity, terror, made them turn. They saw Anders loping after them, no longer man, no longer constrained by bone. His limbs bent at impossible angles, claws screeching sparks off the obsidian, as he ran on all fours. His breath came in steaming bursts, painting the black stone with frost. Another wolf broke free behind him, then another. The pyramid had been a cage. Now it was a breeding ground of hunger. The crew reached the crack at the pyramid's base, stumbling into the Arctic night, but night was no salvation. Outside, the aurora writhed violently, colors flickering like a living thing. The snow no longer fell soft and silent, it hissed, each flake sharp as ash. They sprinted toward their camp, a scattering of tents, supply sledges, and one waiting snowmobile. The sound of the wolves followed them, paws pounding faster than any machine, claws ripping into ice with sickening precision. One of the men tripped, his scream tore across the plateau. A wolf pounced, a blur of black against white. The man vanished beneath it. His cry cut short with the crunch of bone and the spray of crimson mist against snow. The others didn't dare slow. Survival meant running, not mourning. Ellison's legs burned, lungs freezing with every breath. The snowmobile was ahead, salvation on skis. She hurled herself onto the seat, fumbling with the ignition. The machine roared to life, a scream of metal and fuel. The others scrambled onto sledges, clinging to whatever they could. The engine screamed. For a moment, hope surged. Speed would save them, but then she saw it. In the rearview mirror, 3 black wolves surged across the snow. They weren't running, they were gliding, their bodies barely touching the ice, faster than machines, faster than wind. Their glowing eyes reflected aurora green, catching her gaze. One leaped. The snowmobile jerked as its claws raked across the back. Supplies exploded into the night rations. Tents, fuel, all shredded in an instant. Another wolf flanked them, silent as a shadow. Its jaws snapped inches from the driver's leg. The machine screamed louder. But no engine could outrun what was born to hunt. The crew fired flares, bullets, knives, nothing slowed them. Silver alone could have mattered, but there was no silver here, only fear. And fear was nothing to these beasts. Ellison's recorder still hung from her neck. Swinging wildly as the snowmobile tore across the plateau, it caught her frantic whisper. "We can't outrun them." Nothing outruns the Arctic pack. Behind them, howls erupted again, not from 3, but from dozens. The pyramid had been a tomb. Now it was a mouth, and it had spit its monsters back into the world. The snowmobile howled across the wastes, chased by shadows that no human had ever been meant to see again. Where would you run if glowing eyes stared through your window? Tell me below, I want to see who would survive. The snowmobile sputtered, choking in the cold. Before finally skidding to a halt on a jagged ridge, the survivors tumbled off, limbs trembling from more than exhaustion. Behind them, the horizon writhed with shadows. The wolves weren't chasing at full speed anymore. They didn't need to, they were hurting. Ellison forced herself upright, clutching her recorder like a talisman. "We need answers," she rasped. "They sealed this place for a reason. There has to be something." One of the crew dragged a canvas pack through the snow, half ripped from the wolf attack. Inside were their recovered journals, brittle leather tomes they had taken from the pyramid's walls, stuffed with parchments stitched from animal hide. Ellison tore one open, hands shaking as she tried to interpret the drawings. The images weren't myths. They were instructions. By the glow of a failing headlamp, she pieced it together. Centuries ago, the northern tribes battled an enemy they could not kill. The wolves. Of the aurora predators that rose from blood spilled on ice. They didn't just hunt men, they took them, reshaping flesh into fur, binding spirit into hunger. The shamans knew bullets wouldn't work, nor blades, nor flame. Only one element bound the beasts: silver mixed with volcanic stone. With it, they built a prison, a pyramid of black obsidian quarried from Earth's wounds, each block fused with veins of silver. Inside, they carved chains, runes, and walls of worship, not to honor, but to contain. Her voice cracked as she read. The wolves cannot be slain, they can only be silenced. One of the crew muttered, broken. So, we didn't find a relic, we broke a lock. The aurora above them pulsed violently, its colors bleeding unnaturally across the sky, green twisted to red, purple streaks dripping like wounds across the stars. Every flare of light corresponded to a howl. The sky itself seemed bound to the wolves. Ellison flipped to the last pages, breath freezing in her throat. The drawings showed a final ritual. Human figures kneeling, veins opened. Blood offered willingly to reseal the pyramid. Not soldiers, not hunters, sacrifices. Her recorder clicked as she spoke, voice shaking. The pyramid isn't a monument. It's a cage, and we are the jailers now. Silence followed, but only for a moment. Then, across the ice, came the sound of claws raking stone. The pack had stopped herding, they were circling. The survivors raised rifles and flare guns, knowing both were useless. Their camp was gone. Their sledges scattered, there was nowhere left to run. Ellison's gaze lingered on the journal, on the drawings of men bowing beneath the aurora. Blood spilling to seal the wolves inside again, she closed her eyes, breath ragged. They didn't trap the wolves forever, she whispered. They trapped them. Until we were foolish enough to open the door again. The aurora brightened, glowing like a crown above the black pyramid in the distance. Shadows loped across the ice, eyes shimmering like twin suns. The wolves were no longer hiding. They were reclaiming their territory, and the humans, as ever, were just prey. Curses like this don't end. They echo, subscribe, and join the archive before the next howl. The ridge cracked beneath their boots, fissures spiderwebbing across the ice. The wolves were closing in, dozens of them now, their eyes glowing like shards of the aurora itself. Weaving through the storm with unnatural grace, Ellison raised her flare gun, but even she knew it was ritual, not defense. The flare streaked upward, bursting into a weak blossom of red. Against the aurora's savage glow, it looked like a candle beside the sun. The wolves stopped, their howls cut short. In the silence, Ellison realized what they were doing. Waiting. Studying. These weren't beasts acting on instinct. They were executioners biding their time. Then Anders, or what had become him, stepped forward. Taller now than when they'd first seen the transformation, his black fur shimmered in the aurora light. Steam hissed from his fangs as his jaw cracked wider than nature allowed. He wasn't just a wolf, he was a herald. The others behind him growled in rhythm, a chorus of death. The aurora pulsed in time with it, each ripple a signal. Ellison understood then. The sky wasn't watching them, it was feeding them. The first wolf leaped. A blur of black and blue light collided with one of the survivors, tearing him from his feet. His scream became a gurgle as claws ripped through coat, muscle, bone. The snow drank the blood greedily, staining white with crimson rivers. Another wolf crashed into the sledges, scattering the remaining supplies. A rifle snapped in half. A body fell silent. Panic broke the survivors into fragments, scattering them across the ice. The wolves split their ranks like strategists, cutting off escape. Ellison stumbled. Journal clutched to her chest. She felt its weight like a curse. The drawings, the sacrifice, it all led here. We can't fight them, she whispered. We can only close the door. But the wolves didn't give her the chance. The pack surged together, a wave of fur and claws. Ellison's ears filled with the sound of cracking bones, shrieks ripped into the wind, and the wet snap of jaws breaking spines. The ridge became a slaughter ground. One of the men fired his last bullet directly into a wolf's eye. The beast flinched, then lunged faster, jaws clamping around his skull. The crack echoed across the plateau. His body went limp before it hit the ice. Ellison ran. She didn't look back. The journal pressed against her ribs, flapping with each stride. behind her. She could hear the pack tearing flesh, the wolves feasting not with desperation, but with ceremony. Each death was an offering to the aurora. The sky above roared, colors writhing in ecstasy. Green bled to crimson, purple veins cut across the stars. The wolves raised their heads in unison, muzzles drenched in blood, and howled. The sound pierced her skull, vibrating in her teeth, clawing at her sanity. Ellison fell to her knees, clutching the journal, tears freezing on her cheeks. In her final breath before the shadows closed in, she whispered into her recorder, "This isn't the last transformation. The next one is worse. The curse never sleeps. It only waits for blood." And then the wolves descended. The aurora flared brighter, illuminating the massacre in flickering, otherworldly hues. The pack had returned. The prison was broken, and the ice would never hold them again. This isn't the last transformation. The next one is worse. Follow the howl to the story waiting on screen. Snow whipped across the ridge like claws dragging across glass. Ellison's recorder lay in the bloodied snow where she'd fallen. Its red light blinked, still capturing the last gasps of her whisper, even as her body was lost beneath the frenzy of the pack. But Ellison was not the only one. One figure had fled in the chaos, crawling across the plateau. Lungs raw, vision shattered by aurora glare, he didn't look back, he didn't dare. Every instinct screamed that eyes were on him, dozens of them, glowing, hungry, but for reasons he couldn't understand. The wolves didn't finish him, they let him run. Maybe they wanted a witness. The snowmobile appeared out of the white void like a ghost. Its frame was dented, half frozen, but its engine coughed to life after 3 desperate pulls. He mounted it with trembling hands, clutching nothing but fear. The machine howled across the plateau, leaving a jagged scar of tracks behind him. The aurora stretched overhead, no longer a ribbon of beauty but a crown of fire. Colors bled into one another, writhing like veins across the sky. Each ripple seemed alive, pulsing in rhythm with the howls still rolling from the pyramid far behind him. The world was awake now. He thought escape meant salvation, but as the miles stretched, the horror grew. Shadows flanked him at a distance, wolves loping alongside his snowmobile. They never lunged, never pounced. They ran with him, keeping pace, their glowing eyes locked onto his head. He realized, with ice in his veins, that he wasn't escaping. He was being escorted. Hours later, as dawn threatened on the horizon, the snowmobile sputtered and died. Silence fell. No engine, no breath, only the crunch of paws circling in the snow. The survivor stumbled off, legs failing, body collapsing into drifts. He dared one last glance, and he saw them. Not 3, not a dozen, but hundreds. Black-furred wolves stretching across the tundra, their eyes shimmering every shade of aurora. Their forms rippled with heat in the cold, steam rising like ghosts. They weren't scattered hunters anymore, they were an army, at their center. Towering above them was Anders, his fur matted with frozen blood, his claws dragging sparks across the ice. He raised his head to the aurora and howled, a note so sharp it cracked the air itself. The pack answered in unison, a sound vast enough to rattle mountains. The survivor fainted. When he awoke, he was alone. Tracks crisscrossed the snow in every direction, already filling with drifting powder. The horizon was empty. The pyramid was gone from sight, buried again by storm, but the aurora lingered, pulsing faintly overhead. As though waiting for the next offering of blood, he stumbled south, delirious, clutching Ellison's ruined journal against his chest. Words blurred on the page, but one line remained clear, burned into his mind like scripture: the wolves cannot be slain. They can only be silenced. Somewhere behind him, in the storm, he thought he heard claws scratching, or maybe it was the wind. Maybe the wolves weren't chasing him at all. Maybe they were already ahead of him. The pack grows stronger with every whisper. Share this tale if you dare, and join us before the curse finds you alone. And for those who hunger for more, step deeper into the shadows with our ultimate werewolf horror playlist, linked in the description below. In the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them, and trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.